Through the use of ism pronounced ism, which in Arabic means a sin, or anything forbidden, the Caucasians were able to corrupt society. Through greed, envy, pride, etc. he took away your society, replacing it with socialism. Our government was polluted with nationalism and our communities converted into communism. We were made to believe that we were individuals, self-existing, socially concerned with human beings and their relations to each other. Latin socialists, socius, companion, mutual sharing in. Socialism, a theory of system of social organization by which the means of production and distribution are owned, managed or controlled by the government, state socialism, or by associations of working, guild socialism. Commune, a community of people comprising it to carry out planned communal work. Latin communis, common. Communal, used or participated in by all members of a group or community. Communism, a philosophy or system derived from Marx, advocating state ownership of land and property. A political, social and economic system in which the state is governed by an elite party control. A people, race or tribe who have the same language and history constitutes a nation. This definition limits nationalists to a mere few. Nubians here and abroad as a majority, neither speak the language nor live the customs of their ancient fathers of Nubia. We must first realize that as a common people, we have the same history, speak similar languages and have, to this present day, the same oppressor. The people we live under made up their language in America is not really English. Our forefathers were brought to these shores as slaves and from an absolute physical slavery to a complex mental slavery. So now I have put together a language for us. It is called Nubic. It's easy to learn and has all of our languages within it. Don't miss out, learn it. Mao was for the Chinese, Lenin was for the Russians, and Marx was for the Germans, of whose theories derived from Nubian communities only to be introduced to sin and corruption by the Europeans. This system of government was then injected back into the minds of the Nubians to cause separation and eventual control. Ask us to vote knowing we will not get a fair share. That's not all governments, but many, and it's not just against Nubians or Edomites, it's not against all who are not a part. America is a melting pot. All nationalities which migrated to these shores are represented first by their national origin before American, the word, with the exception of the Native Americans and those who are called the American Negro. The Native Americans because these were the people who occupied the land before European explorers came. The American Negro title is due to the fact that the Europeans know, through the reading of the scriptures, that the Nubians are the children of the Elohim on the planet Earth. We are called Negroes because of our mental and spiritual death. Irregardless, the European knows us, when still many of us don't know ourselves. Negra equals black, Omega equals N/death. The purpose of politics is to control by the 5 Ps, 1. Polytheism, 2. Politics, 3. Psychology, 4. Philosophy, 5. Penal system, which is enacted by all races of people. These people can be recognized by their non-woolly-like hair, which includes even those dark-skinned people with straight hair, East Indians, or Native Americans. The Native Americans, Indians, could not be made into slaves, even though the Jews had tried to make them. There are a number of reasons why the Indians could not be made into slaves. 1. They were not as strong and robust as Nubians and could not work as hard and long as Nubians. 2. They would always manage to run away because since they were the indigenous inhabitants of that area of the Western Hemisphere, they knew the terrain of the country quite well. They could easily hide out and survive. 3. Native Americans were very proud and would not tolerate any type of slavery upon their people. The Nubians had a certain amount of pride also, but if he was proud, he and his family were killed or humiliated by the slave master, just as every Nubian leader today is scandalized to defame them or put them in prison. They can't let a Nubian die great. Many Nubians were fortunate enough to escape to the Indians. These are the Negroes who claim to have Indian in their blood. Some who tried to escape and did not know the country, died of exposure or wild beasts. There was also the Chinese, Japanese, Korean, etc. Although many races are persecuted, mankind's objective is to keep you ignorant in order to divert them from knowing who they really are. So-called revolutionary studies, such as Mao Zedong's Red Book, or the works of Marx, Lenin, etc. Mao was for the Chinese people and their aid to foreign countries was for Chinese interests, while Marx was a German Jew who polluted societies and communities of the Nubians injecting sin. The Jew stole the law which is known as the Old Testament. Within these laws are the 613 commandments. 10 were specifically enacted for the European. The Christian neither observes the law nor the traditions which were revealed to Moses or Jesus. Only those laws which fit their individual needs are accepted. The Muslim has been able to influence the Nubians to acknowledge the other scriptures and prophets and influencing them in the total reading of the Quran and worshipping their image as Muhammad the Arabian prophet. They make him a pale Arab and get mad if you as a Nubian say he is Nubian for your children's souls. These are but 3 divisions, which need not be divided, seeing that if the Most High is one, his books and prophets must be one. But the pale Arabs and European has caused division of the prophets and the books to such an extent that you have forgotten who you are. All you see now is to love everybody because you are all brothers and sisters, which is in opposition to the scriptures. You become Buddhists and anything else because you do not recognize your position and where you belong. You try to be Americans, put on cowboy clothes, they reject you. You put on African clothes, they say you're anti-government. You become Muslims, they try to put you in jail. They don't want you but don't want you to think for yourself. That's where racism comes from. The things the pale man has done to Nubians would explain their wickedness, and if Yaqub was successful with grafting a weak and wicked being, then he succeeded by virtue of the fact that the pale man is weak genetically, because he lacks melanin, and wicked because of all he has done and is still doing it to other people. You are becoming racist again. I'm trying to break that spell. Nubians, or as a new being, you must take on the responsibility for your own actions. Remember, these Asiatic black men are the descendants of the Hindu demons with black skin and straight hair who had a dissatisfied nature. Evil dwelled within them. The evil was already there. It was by the grace of their wise scientist who met with the elders of the Dunakil did they decided to try to graft the evil out of their nature. The ultimate results was the Flugelrods. The Flugelrods came out of this genetic splicing and graftation in attempts to remove their disagreeable side, for evil lived within these Asiatic black men, original Hindus, since their evil ancestors came to the planet 60 and 6 billion years ago. These Hindus are the ones who converted to Yaqub's plan. While living in Arabia, they became the tribe called Sheshbazzar, the 13th tribe known as the Lost Tribe of Shabazz, named after Sheshbazzar, the scientist who carried out the graftation of this weak and wicked beings of Yaqub. Many of the followers of Yaqub got lost on the way. Those that survived the journey around Africa were used in the grafting and making of this new race. For any babies born with black genes, a pin was stuck in their brain, then next was the brown. They were spared to breed, to make the red, the yellow, and then the pale. This process took 600 years of grafting and separating. Thus Yaqub's nation was born. A ruler was set over them, she was called Europa. Europa was empress of this land, yet without guidance they regressed and took refuge in Pelion, that is the Isles of Patmos. Then on up into the mountain region of Thessaly and into the grotto, or grot meaning caves. They conquered and enslaved the original inhabitants of that land, then called Yaa-Nun. These savage beasts that were grafted from the Asiatic Hindu black man were nothing more than the original blonde-haired, blue-eyed, pale-skinned, melanin-lacking, grafted, disagreeable, rebellious seed of Yaqub, the mad scientist. Shameless, moraless, hair covering 3/4 of their body from ankle to shoulder, the beast of the field, also called behemoth. They walked on all fours and ate flesh raw, having bestiality acts. Thus, the dog was their best friend. Because they allowed the dog to lick their leprous sores, and to this day will allow them to sleep in their beds, eat off their plates, and even lick them in the mouth. The outcome of the graftation was the Flugelrods, bred by mixing in the seed of the Pleiadians, which is blonde hair and blue-eyed, mixing and grafting from the genes of the Asiatics, black straight-haired and black-skinned, and black-eyed Hindus. Grafting from the brown germ to the red germ to the yellow germ on into the new earth-bred Flugelrods. Also breeding the abstract, black skin and blue-eyed. He set up rules and regulations that they were to abide by under all circumstances, and those of his followers that did not obey him were to have their throats slit from ear to ear and their bodies left on the seashore at high tide. They separated into 2 groups. The original Halayabites or Hulub Flugelrods, who became known as the Neanderthals or simply cavemen, eating raw flesh, running around on 4s, and living in a state of bestiality. They found their way into the inner caverns of the planet. Many of them took residence there, while others in time used technology and terrorized other innocent tribes. This seed moved behind the Caucasus Mountains on up into Russia and became known as the Khazars. The woolly-haired 7 ether, Orientalist of this seed called Asiatics, were known as the Sepharad or Sephardim Jew. These are the grafted devils that Yaqub created. They are your Flugelrod's original Khazars and your Asiatics, Ashkenazims. Their symbol being the universe, the moon called Umar, also Kamar the sun, and the bright morning star. They use the crescent moon and the pentagram, that is the 5-pointed star. The original symbol of the seal of Solomon, the son of David, was the 5-pointed star. Yet he wore his father's ring, which was the shield of David, or the 6-pointed star. The seal of Solomon was used to command and control disagreeable malevolent beings or jinns. The 6-pointed star represents many things, but never has it been given to the Jebusites, so-called pale Jews. The Jew's symbol later becomes the 6-pointed interlocking star. The fact that this symbol interlocks tells you that this is not the real 6-pointed star. These stars are said to be the most powerful evil signs in the occult world. It is the same star that the so-called Jews, Jebusites, use. They try to make believe that it is our symbol, but it is not. The original Jacobites used the hexagram, six-pointed star, they call Mogan David, the Star of David or the Star of Bethlehem. They endowed their creation with 120 years of life. It took 120 degrees of knowledge to accomplish this over a period of 600 years of those who were under Yaqub's rules and regulations, all to graft a new race. This is nothing new, you've heard of this before, it's the same thing Hitler tried to do. Meaning, this very practice were carried on in later times by Hitler or Hitla, which is the 18th name of one of the 200 fallen demons. Hitler himself tried to graft a genetically superior race or breed of people he called the Aryan race. This Aryan calls himself Indo-Aryan, meaning the Nobel the albino who lived in the Caucasian mountains. Arnold Schwarzenegger was one of his breed, note the name. Schwarzenegger, it is a region between the Black Sea on the west and the Caspian Sea on the east. A great mountain range which raised to 18,510 feet at Mount Elbrus from the word Abras meaning leprosy in Ashuric Syriac, Arabic. Caucasia, a part of Russia, has an area of 170,000 square miles. The Greeks name it Caucasia, the home of the Flugelrods, as they are called in Al-Mahdi or what is called Germany today, their original name Halabeans or Hulub to distinguish themselves from the Caucasians, Caucasians deteriorating Asiatics. Elbrus or home of those Abras beings, lepers of the mountains, called also sons of Canaan. Thus the term abracadabra, a mystical word used in incantations or as a charm to ward off disease, originally said Abras cadaver used to mean the bodies of lepers. This was a gradual process. The regressive gene of the black-skinned straight-haired beings called the Asiatic black man was grafted into the red man, grafted into the yellow man, grafted on into the pale man of the grotto or grot meaning caves, the Halabeans Flugelrods of 8,400 years ago. This pale man or Halabeen Flugelrod should not be confused with the albino seed, the cursed Canaanites, meaning lowlanders, the descendants of Canaan of 4,000 years ago, before 2,000 years ago or 6,000 years ago. This was the birth of their own Adam, also called Edom. For he had ruddy red skin and did blush, for there was tsorahath in Aramaic Hebrew meaning leprosy or a malignant skin disease in the skin of his flesh. The Flugelrods took refuge in the Caucasus Mountains, where Canaan the albino, and his wife Sala, the Nubian, would dwell between the Caspian and Black Sea, later known as the Amorites mountain dwellers. There are as many Nubians tribes. The original name for the Nubian tribe Ethiopian Kushite. These cavern-dwelling beings, while inhabiting these mountains, incurred difficulties in reproducing due to the lack of salt in their bodies, and with their desire to reproduce they came out of their mountain dwellings seeking melaninites, for they lacked the necessary quantity of melanin in their bodies. They savagely raided the Nubian villages, killing the men and stealing the women, then returning to the mountains with their captives, the albino lepers, cavemen, aboriginals, aborigines, Amorite, Aryan fought amongst themselves for the possession of the Nubian women. Most of the Australian Aboriginals have their barottary gland and use their four higher senses, so they are called spirit monkey or monks. Hindus began to give reverence to the one-half animal, one-half human creatures that came from Kingu. The Australian Aborigines have 6 ether straight hair, even blonde hair with copper-toned skin. In order to assure security, the Aryans migrated with their Nubian captives from the Caucasus Mountains to what is known today as India to mix in with the original East Indians. The merging of these two extreme races, the Caucasian and the Nubian, brought about a being that reflects the traits of both the Nubian and the Caucasian. So you find leprosy amongst the Nubian also, while the texture of their hair varies from 6 to 8 ether, their features can vary, their skin tone can vary, their nature and behavior patterns can also vary. Many people get confused because there are two sets of pale men, meaning, there were pale men that were the results of the graftation of Yaqub's devil 8,400 years ago, and the other is from Canaan of 6,000 years ago, the Amorites. The Flugelrods are not to be mistaken with the cursed seed of Canaan. Both were eating raw flesh, running around on all fours and living in a state of bestiality. The Flugelrods separated into two groups. The original Hindus chased the dissatisfied Hindus who became Yaqub's followers out of Arabia. The original Flugelrods are Yaqub's grafted devil of 8,400 years ago. In many religions there are different beliefs on the origin of the pale man. Many so-called foolish black Israelite sects believe that the pale race originates from Esau, Edom, father of the Edomite, Genesis 25:30. They don't know what they are talking about, they can't even read Hebrew. The Nation of Islam believes that Jacob grafted the devil, they are half right. Then you have the confused Orthodox Sunni Muslims who say that Rab created all races from one clot of blood. How is this possible with all these different types of blood? Quran 96:1 used Rabbika, your Rab not Allah. They are not concerned with the race from which man was created, just as long as he's a Arab and looks like what they say Muhammad looked like. On the other hand, the Christians do not care about the origin of their race, just as long as their God looks like the Jesus they have. This is why I have to clear up this misconception on the origin of the pale man. Then you have the black Hebrews or Israelites who believe the pale race came about because of the cursing of Gehazi of 2 Kings 5:27. Gehazi was cursed because he was dishonest and wanted to deceive a commander who was greatly respected by the king of Syria. Gehazi desired the material things of life, thus, the curse of leprosy was placed on him and his descendants. Why was this curse placed on Gehazi, you might ask? Let me explain. There was the great soldier of the Syrian army Naaman who had leprosy. He was very well known and respected by the kings of Syria. During one Syrian invasion, an Israelite girl was taken and made to be the servant of Naaman's wife. The little girl wished for Naaman to be cured, thus she told her mistress that if Naaman could go to Samaria where the prophet Elisha lived, she knew he would cure Naaman, and at the king of Syria's request he sent Naaman to Israel with a letter telling the king he wanted Naaman cured. However, the king of Israel refused. He felt insulted because he thought the king of Syria was trying to imply that he was El-Yahuwah. Elisha heard this and told the king, "Send Naaman to me and I'll cure him." The prophet Elisha cured him by telling him to bathe in the Jordan River 7 times, but not before. Naaman refused because he expected to be cured by prayer to El-Yahuwah. Naaman, so grateful, offered the prophet Elisha gifts of payment. However, Elisha refused. He later complied and was cured. What does this have to do with Gehazi? Gehazi was a servant of the prophet Elisha, thus when he saw the pieces of silver Naaman offered to Elisha, he desired the material things of this world. Thus Gehazi left and tried to catch up with Naaman to get him to give him money. When he caught up with Naaman, he proceeded to lie about 2 visitors visiting Elisha and asked for 3,000 pieces of silver and 2 changes of clothes. Being kind, he gave Gehazi double of what he asked, 6,000 silver pieces instead of 3,000. When Gehazi returned, the prophet Elisha asked him where was he. Gehazi lied, saying he never left. The prophet Elisha reminded Gehazi that he was there in spirit when Naaman came from out of his chariot, thereby informing him now was not the time to desire or accept material things. As it states in 2 Kings 5:27, "The leprosy therefore of Naaman shall cleave unto thee, and unto thy seed forever." And he went out from his presence a leper as white as snow. Him and his descendants had to take on the curse of Naaman, the curse of leprosy. This is just another example of how people think the pale race came about. Refer to bulletin number 9, The Making of the Disciples. Yet everyone refuses to look at the facts. The fact is the pale race could not have originated with Gehazi. Why? Because Naaman had it before he did. Where did he get it from? Canaan is recorded as having it before both of them, which in actuality is where the curse of leprosy originated. Remember, Esau nor Jacob is the father of the pale race, and Jacob did not graft the pale man. Canaan is the father of the pale race: Amorites, Girgasite, Hivite, Arvadite, Zemarite, Hamathite, Sinite, Arkite, Sidon, and Heth. A certain group of Hebrew Israelites, led by Yahweh ben Yahweh, profess in their book Yahweh Judges America, that Esau, Edom, is the father of the pale race, the white people, the children of Edom in the day. However, on page 106 of the same book, they say that the Canaanites are the pale race. For the Canaanites, the white race, also, the black Jews or black Israelites teach that the Canaanites, pale race, are Edomites who came from Esau, Edom, while on the other hand they profess that the black race originated from Jacob or Israel. Also, the Nation of Islam and the 5% Nation teach in their books that Jacob grafted the pale man, and that's where all the white devils come from. They say, the colored man is the Caucasian, white man, or Yahweh WB's grafted devil, the skunk of the planet Earth. The prophet Jacob, son of Isaac and Rebekah, did not graft the pale man physically, but he created the mentality of the Caucasian. Caucasians are the descendants of Canaan, who are primarily from the seed of his 3rd and 4th sons, Jebus and Amor. Jacob was a very shrewd, cunning, business-minded man. Thus, his descendants inherited this trait, Genesis 30:32, 37-43. Canaan is the origin of the pale race that exists today. He is their Adam of 4,000 years before Jesus of 2,000 years ago. His father Ham, which means black, was possessed by Anak, Azazel's, the evil one's, bride after having an argument with his wife Halima. This led him to look at his father's nakedness, Genesis 9:23, which resulted in laws concerning standards for the people, Leviticus 18:6-7, cursing Ham's 4th son, Canaan, Genesis 9:25. Ham's act was such a great sin because by letting Anak possess him he made it possible for the 200 fallen angelic beings, cherubims, and Azazel, the evil one, to reincarnate in Canaan's 11 sons. Canaan was physically cursed, Leviticus 14:32-34, with leprosy, Leviticus 13:9-11. He was born an albino, Leviticus 13:30-36, with yellow, blonde, hair and blue eyes, Quran 20-102. Canaan was forced by his father Ham to marry his sister, Salah, so that the law would be fulfilled. They, along with their offsprings, dwelled in the Caucasus Mountains until Abraham came with pigs to clean up their filth. Genesis 10:15-18. This is why you Jebusite, Jews, descendants of Jebus son of Canaan think that Abraham is your father. The name Canaan means lowlander, one who came out of the mountains, the Caucasus Mountains where his offspring dwelled. Quran 69:8-18. It is obvious that people are very confused about this topic because they keep getting the two mixed up. Remember, the Flugelrods produce extremely low levels of melanin, and your Canaanites are their descendants, who also produce low levels of melanin. Both are melanin recessive beings, and what is the importance of this thing called melanin? The pigment melanin is responsible for the color of skin, which they lack. When melanin does not appear in the skin, it is a deficiency, and this deficiency comes about because of the absence of melanocyte, that which synthesizes the melanin is deficient. These cells called melanocyte are responsible for all the colors of hair from yellow to black. The tree-like melanocyte cells in the deeper epidermis is what produces this dark brown pigment called melanin. The pigment is introduced into nearby cells through the branch tips of the melanocyte cells in units called melanosomes. Knowing that, hair turns gray when the melanocyte die. There are different textures of hair, 6 ether to 9 ether. They are your 6 ether beings, you the Nubian are your 9 ether beings. What you fail to realize is hair can be straight, 6 ether meaning 6-point melanin, wavy, curly 7 1/2 point melanin, or kinky, 9-point ether, and it is in that kinky or kingly hair that was given to you from your parents, the Anunnaki Elohim. Then there are those beings who are albinos. The albino seed's name comes from the Sea Albion, called the White Island, in the land of Saxons, and the Anglics called Brit today. This genetic disorder, albinism, is a group of genetic disorders affecting 1 out of every several thousand humans and other animals. The first being Canaan himself. His curse was the removal of the divine, which resulted in the reduction of melanin, thus cutting off his family ties with the Elohim. He transformed from a son of the Elohim to a son of Sam. The word Caucasian derives from the word Caucasus, mountains in Russia. According to Webster's 9th New Collegiate Dictionary, Caucasian means 1. Of or relating to the Caucasus or its inhabitants. 2. Of or relating to the pale race of mankind is classified according to physical features. Of or relating to the pale race as defined by law, European ancestry. Originally, inhabiting the Caucasus mountain areas, their complexions vary from light to very dark skin hue with straight hair. The paleman, Caucasian of today, is a result of the curse of leprosy. He has a lack of melanin, nor does he have a soul, Judges 1:19. Because of the unlawful act that Ham did, his offspring Canaan was cursed. The Ashuric/Syriac, Arabic, word for curse is malun, meaning one who is cursed. Note how close it is to melanin. It's the same word. The root of the word is lana, meaning curse, damn, execrate, to utter the oath of condemnation, to curse each other. This curse lanad is the physical curse, that of leprosy, which is where the pale people came from. Canaan was born pale, and an albino, in other words, with the curse of leprosy. Albino is an organism lacking normal pigmentation, such as a person having abnormally pale skin, very light hair, and lacking normal eye coloring. Albinism in human beings has long been used as an example of a simple dominant recessive gene relationship. The recessive gene allele for albinism fails to determine an enzyme required to produce the pigment melanin, and the gene is epistatic to other genes controlling the degree of pigmentation. Persons who are homozygous will lack the pigment no matter whether they are from fair-skinned or dark-skinned races. You can imagine the consternation of geneticists when they found 2 albinos who had married and had children with very dark skin, hair, and eyes. Canaan lacked pigmentation, no color or blackness, so his skin was pale and translucent, can be seen through. Due to the lack of protein in their body, the follicles of their hair lie crosswise, and the hairs emerge in a slanting direction of the surface of the skin. In other words, it literally flops. Because Canaan was an albino, he lacked the normal eye coloring, which caused his eyes to be weak and sensitive to direct and indirect sunlight. This is why Canaan sought refuge in the mountains, where the lights were dim. The cold climate of the mountains was also conducive to their leprous condition because it stopped the leprosy from spreading. Because the blood of an albino does not contain the necessary factors for clotting and reproduction, they must receive blood transfusions first at the time of birth and then regularly throughout their lives. This is why they came down from the Caucasus Mountains. Canaan fled, because he was scabby and white and everyone was darker than him, so he stood out. People shunned and persecuted him, so he fled to the Caucasus Mountains. For 300 years, Canaan and his wife's seed, with their companions, dwelled in the caves until Abraham was sent to clean them up. Canaan was innocent to everything. He was confused about being cursed with leprosy, and he was shunned and persecuted. Because of their leprous nature, the descendants of Canaan descended to the level of animals, eating raw flesh, walking on all fours, and mingling freely with the animals, sexually. The pale man originated from the Caucasus Mountains, where there was very little plant life and not much means for salt. This condition forced him to rob the Nubian female of her chastity in order to keep his seed alive. It's called integration. The Caucasian woman who was left in the mountains resorted to lying with and having sex with beasts, such as the jackal, which is an ancestor of today's dog. The phrase "dog is man's best friend" came from this situation. The dog would lick the festered sores of the leper and clean them for him. His seed was kept alive because the Caucasian woman and the jackal mated. This is where you get people who possess an animalistic nature. The reason why Amorites could have offsprings from a union with an animal was because they themselves had retreated to being animals and were lab rats for extraterrestrials who did genetic splicing with all kinds of animals and humans. The lepers that remained in the mountains were pushed further into the Caucasus Mountains and fell so low as to mate with the dog-like animals, which is called the act of bestiality, and anyone who was guilty of it was condemned. Leviticus 18:22-23. If it did not happen, there would have been no reason for this law, and if you want to know who this is talking about, just read Leviticus chapter 13 right on up to 17. The result of this mixture were ape-like animals. The ones who had left the mountains did not return. As much hair as the Amorites have on their bodies should tell us something about them. The ape and the dog has his whole body covered with hair, and beneath the hair is pale skin, not brown or black. In other words, most animals have their whole body covered with hair, which would include the pale man. Despite his evolution, he has never lost this hairy trait he had inherited. The racial characteristics of these people range from pale to pink to cream in complexion, hair very straight, as apes, to wavy, as goats, height averages 5 feet and 8 inches for male, and features are Caucasian. The Canaanites reside mainly in Europe, but since for many centuries his leprosy has not been contagious and he is now considered clean, Leviticus 13, he now inhabits many countries of the world, North and South America, Europe, Australia, North and South Africa, and the Middle East. If you've noticed, all the countries mentioned, except the Middle East, have basically the same climate weather. North America, including Canada, has a temperate climate. This means that there is a cold season as well as a warm season. Amorites tend to inhabit the areas farthest from the equator. In South America they reside mainly in Argentina, which has a climate similar to the climate in North America. In Africa, most Amorites are in South Africa. The reason why he needs a climate that is a temperate one is because he cannot withstand heat for too long a period. He must have an interval of cold weather, which is helpful to his physical condition. Some Canaanites are able to withstand the heat principally because they have enough black in them from integration to protect them. The condition of leprosy is not overwhelming in them. The inhabitants of the Middle East and North Africa are the principal examples. The heat and hot sun irritates the latent disease in Amorites and causes such absurdities as freckles, chapped peeling skin, sunburn, liver spots, psoriasis, and skin cancer. Nubians are rarely afflicted with these type of skin problems, especially skin cancer. Another very important reason why he needs a mild, cool climate is because he cannot breathe very well in light and hot air. An aquiline type nose is very well suited to inhale cold air. This is because the nostrils are closer and the air it does take in is warmed adequately in the process of inhaling. The Nubian is not a Canaanite. There are those with black skin and straight hair, but because of the straight hair, these Hindus, they cannot be classified as Nubian. They are accursed because they have this straight hair. Remember, the Nubian dwells in Nubala, or Nubia, in Sudan, Africa. The climate in Sudan, Africa is very warm, with the temperature rising sometimes as high as 140 degrees centigrade because the equator is almost directly around the middle of the continent. Lepers cannot dwell in such an atmosphere for too long, or without an electric fan. Most Canaanites inhabit the northern regions of Sudan, Africa. Many have heard, assuredly, what scientists have said: don't mix science and religion. If one attempts to look at science and religion together, one will find that many things in science do not make sense, principally because the pale man is not a religious being and he will not easily believe in things that may mystify him. He tries to break each and every existing thing down into classes. This is so he can explain things to himself. He has even gone as far as to fabricate a great many of the scientific facts that he has the world believing. First of all, in ancient times there was no such area called Kenya. That whole area was Kush and was inhabited by Nubians who migrated down the Nile River to the area near the source of the Nile, Lake Victoria, which was more mountainous and had various lakes. The remains that were found were those of our Nubian ancestors who lived in that area. Since they were only parts of the whole skeleton, the pale man does not accurately know if it was an ape. The remains of apes and ape men are those of Amorites who were born of the union of a dog and pale woman and had then evolved into an ape, then ape man, then into man's kind. No Nubian man with kinky hair had ever evolved from any kind of dog. The Nubian was cursed with leprosy, and the pale man was and is the result of the curse of leprosy. Noah cursed his son Ham, but the sins of the father shall fall upon the son. This means that Ham's son would inherit the punishment for the sins committed by him. Leprosy is an infectious disease caused by bacterium. Bacteria, plural for bacterium, is a decaying disease, commonly called Hansen's disease. There are two forms of this disease, although both commonly appear on the same person: Amorites, pale people. One of the two is usually dominating. Leprosy occurs more frequently in men than in women. That's because the curse was on a son of Canaan and not a daughter. In some ways today, you will see blacks who have inherited leprosy because their parents had integrated and mixed their seed willingly and unwillingly. When a black person contracts this disease, he starts turning white. This does not make him or her a devil. Besides having more hair on his body than Nubians, the pale man tends to have more and different vestiges on his body. Vestiges are structures on the body that have not disappeared through evolution. One of the most interesting vestiges that the pale man has is a tail. Technically speaking, the tail is called a coccyx and it is located at the end of the spinal column. However, the most important point is that occasionally babies are born with clear and visible tails which the doctors clip off at birth. The Nubian has contracted, as a result of living with the pale man, such diseases as dandruff, psoriasis, syphilis, gonorrhea, eczema, arthritis, rheumatism, tuberculosis, cancer, leukemia, polio, hemophilia, multiple sclerosis, and many other strange diseases that affect the skin and nervous system.